The morning started ordinary, almost too ordinary. That's what Sergeant Thomas Wright thought later when he replayed everything in his mind. Days at Buckingham Palace during trooping the colour preparations usually had a rhythm-controlled chaos. Hurried staff, royal family members moving between rehearsals and meetings. Today felt different, quieter, like everyone was holding their breath. Wright had been assigned to the East Gallery, third floor. Not the most prestigious post during the celebrations, but important. The gallery overlooked the interior courtyard on one side and connected to the famous balcony, the one where the royal family appeared for the crowds on the other. During preparations, family members sometimes used this route to reach the balcony for practice runs, checking sight lines and positions. He'd been standing at his post for 20 minutes when he heard the footsteps. Two sets, one heavier, determined, the other lighter, quicker, trying to keep up. Adult and child. Wright straightened slightly but kept his expression neutral. Standard procedure. Then he saw them round the corner. Queen Camilla and Princess Charlotte. Nothing unusual about that on the surface. Camilla often spent time with the younger royals during palace events, but something in Charlotte's posture made Wright's training kick in. The way she walked, not beside Camilla but slightly behind, being led, the way her free hand gripped the fabric of her dress, the way she wasn't talking. Charlotte always talked. Every guard who'd worked royal events knew that. The young princess had her mother's warmth, loved chatting with staff, asked questions about everything. Today, silence. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Wright said, nodding respectfully. Camilla barely glanced at him. "Sergeant." Her tone was clipped, distracted. Her hand remained firmly on Charlotte's shoulder, fingers pressed into the fabric of the girl's rehearsal outfit, the pale blue dress she'd wear for the actual balcony appearance. Charlotte looked up at Wright. Just for a second, her eyes were wide, not excited wide, scared wide. Then she looked away quickly, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. Every instinct Wright had developed over years of military service started screaming. Something was off. He couldn't point to one specific thing that violated protocol or raised an obvious alarm. But the cumulative effect of small wrongnesses, Charlotte's silence, Camilla's tension, the odd timing added up to something he couldn't ignore. They passed him, heading toward the balcony access corridor. Wright remained at his post, but his mind was already working through scenarios. Families had complicated dynamics. Royal families even more so. He'd been briefed never to insert himself into family matters unless there was clear danger. But before we get into what happened next, make sure you hit that subscribe button on Crown Watch, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. Wright counted to 10, then he moved. Not following directly, that would be too obvious, but repositioning himself with a clear view down the corridor where they'd gone. He could justify it as routine patrol if questioned. The corridor to the balcony was long, lined with portraits and morning light from tall windows. At the far end, double doors led to the balcony itself. Wright saw Camilla and Charlotte about halfway down. They'd stopped. Camilla had crouched slightly, speaking to Charlotte. From this distance, Wright couldn't hear the words, but he could read body language. Camilla's gestures were sharp, pointing, emphatic. Charlotte's shoulders had hunched. She was shaking her head, small movements, like she was afraid to refuse too obviously but couldn't agree. Wright's hand moved closer to his radio, not grabbing it, just ready. Years in active duty had taught him to prepare for trouble before it became obvious to everyone else. Then Charlotte did something that made Wright's blood run cold. She took a step backward, away from Camilla. A small step, barely noticeable, but clear in its meaning. The young princess was trying to create distance. Camilla's hand shot out, fast. She grabbed Charlotte's wrist, not gently. Charlotte's whole body jerked forward with the pull. Wright started walking, not running, not yet, but moving with purpose down the corridor. His boots made soft sounds on the carpet runner, deliberate enough to announce his approach without being aggressive. Camilla heard him coming. She straightened, releasing Charlotte's wrist but keeping one hand on the girl's shoulder. When she turned to look at Wright, her expression was perfectly composed. Royal mask in place, but her jaw was tight, her breathing slightly elevated. "Is there something you need, Sergeant?" Her voice carried just enough edge to remind him of the hierarchy. Queen speaking to palace guard. Wright stopped at a respectful distance. "Ma'am, I wanted to confirm whether you needed the balcony access opened. Protocol requires advance notice for security sweeps. It was true, also irrelevant right now. Wright was buying time, creating a reason to stay nearby, to keep watching. We're simply doing a walkthrough for Charlotte, Camilla said smoothly. She needs to practice her positioning for tomorrow's appearance. I thought it would be helpful to bring her out here when it's quiet, without the pressure of cameras and crowds. Perfectly reasonable explanation. Exactly the kind of thing a grandmother might do with a nervous grandchild before a major public event. Wright wanted to believe it, wanted to accept the simple story, and return to his post. But Charlotte hadn't looked up, hadn't confirmed anything. She stood very still, staring at the carpet, that tiny hand still gripping the fabric of her dress. Wright noticed something else now that he was closer. Her breathing was shallow, quick, like she was trying not to cry. Perhaps I should check with the princess's protection officer, Wright said carefully. Ensure they're aware of her location. Charlotte's head snapped up. For just a second, hope flashed across her face. Then, Camilla's fingers tightened on her shoulder. Wright saw the pressure, saw Charlotte wince slightly, and the young girl's expression went neutral again. That won't be necessary, Camilla said. Her voice had gone cold. The princess is with family. I hardly think we need additional security supervision for a grandmother taking her granddaughter for a walk. The emphasis on grandmother was deliberate, a reminder of relationship, of right, of authority. Wright felt the weight of hierarchy pressing down. Queen Camilla, royal family. His job was to protect them, yes, but also to stay in his lane, to not interfere with internal family dynamics. Of course, ma'am, he heard himself say. I'll be at my post if you need anything. He turned, started walking back, got 3 steps. Then he heard Charlotte's voice, barely a whisper, but in the quiet corridor it carried. Please, just one word. But it broke Wright's heart and made his decision simultaneously. He turned back around. Camilla had already started moving Charlotte toward the balcony doors again, walking faster now, clearly trying to cover the distance before Wright could interfere further. Your Majesty, I need to ask you to stop. Wright's voice was firm now, no more pretense of casual inquiry. This was a direct order from palace security. Camilla froze. When she turned, the royal mask had cracked. Anger showed through, sharp and undisguised. Excuse me. Wright closed the distance between them. Protocol said, maintain respectful space from royals. His gut said, get close enough to intervene physically if needed. He trusted his gut. Ma'am, I need to speak with Princess Charlotte directly. Palace security protocol. This is absurd. Camilla's voice rose slightly. Not a shout. Royalty didn't shout, but louder, harder. You're overstepping your authority. I'm going to have you reassigned for this. That's your right, ma'am. Wright kept his voice level. But first, I need to speak with the princess. Regulations require that we verify the well-being of all royal family members, particularly minors, when there are indicators of potential distress. Indicators. Camilla's laugh was harsh. She's a child who's nervous about a public appearance. I'm helping her practice. What possible indicators are you? Charlotte, Wright said, speaking past Camilla directly to the young girl. Are you all right? You can tell me. It's safe to tell me. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at Camilla, then at Wright, then down at her shoes. Her mouth opened, closed. She was terrified to speak. Camilla's hand moved from Charlotte's shoulder to her wrist again. Come along, Charlotte. We don't have time for this nonsense. Your mother expects you to be ready for tomorrow, and we haven't finished. My mum doesn't know I'm here. Charlotte's voice was small but clear. The tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. She thinks I'm with my tutor. You told me not to tell anyone we were coming here. The words landed like grenades. Wright's training took over completely. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Charlotte and Camilla. Not touching either of them, not yet, but creating a physical barrier. Your Majesty, I'm going to need you to take your hand off the princess. How dare you? Camilla's composure shattered completely. Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? I could have you dismissed. I could have you charged. You're making accusations based on a frightened child who doesn't understand. She understands enough to be afraid, Wright said quietly. And I understand enough to know that when a child asks for help, I help. Please step back, ma'am. For a long moment, Camilla didn't move. Her fingers stayed locked around Charlotte's wrist. Wright could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. How far could she push this? What were the actual limits of her authority versus palace security protocol? Then Wright saw something else. Camilla's free hand had moved to the balcony door handle. The balcony, 3 stories up, overlooking the palace forecourt on one side, the interior courtyard on the other. Stone floor far below. During actual events, the balcony was secure, checked and rechecked, cordoned and monitored. Right now, during preparation time, it was just an empty space, with a waist-high railing and a long drop. Wright's blood went ice cold. Step away from that door. His voice carried a tone he hadn't used since active combat. The voice that meant, I will use force if you make me. Camilla's hand tightened on the handle. Her other hand pulled Charlotte closer. You're being ridiculous. We're going out on the balcony to practice. That's all. That's what we came here for. No, Charlotte said. Her voice was stronger now. No, that's not what you said. You said we were going to fix things. You said I needed to learn my place. You said... Camilla yanked the door open. The morning air rushed in, cool and bright. She pulled Charlotte toward the opening. Wright moved. He didn't think about consequences. Didn't think about hierarchy or protocol, or the fact that he was about to physically restrain the Queen Consort. He thought about Charlotte's face. About that whispered, please. About the fact that he'd been hired to protect the royal family, and that included protecting them from each other when necessary. His hand closed around Camilla's wrist. Firm, controlled. The grip he'd learned in restraint training, enough pressure to make release necessary without causing injury. Ma'am, let go of the princess. Now. Camilla tried to pull free. Wright's grip didn't budge. Charlotte, he said, keeping his eyes on Camilla but speaking to the girl. Step behind me. Now. Charlotte didn't hesitate. The moment Camilla's grip loosened in surprise at Wright's intervention, the young princess pulled free and darted behind Wright's legs, pressing herself against the wall behind him. What happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it. But first, drop a comment and let us know. Would you have done the same thing in his position? Now, here's what the guard discovered. Wright released Camilla's wrist and stepped back, keeping himself between her and Charlotte. Camilla stood in the balcony doorway, breathing hard, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Her hair had come slightly loose from its pins. Her face was flushed. You've just ended your career, she said. Her voice shook with rage or something else. Wright couldn't tell. Do you understand that? You've physically assaulted the Queen Consort. You've interfered with a family matter based on the imaginings of a child who asked for help. Wright interrupted. Who's terrified? Who explicitly said her mother doesn't know she's here and that you told her to keep it secret. He kept his voice calm, factual. Ma'am, I'm requesting that you step back into the corridor. Charlotte will be returned to her parents immediately. If you'd like to file a complaint about my conduct, that's absolutely your right, and I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. Camilla's eyes narrowed. You think they'll believe you? A guard with, 3 years at the palace? Against my word. 4 years, Wright said quietly. And I'm not concerned about who they believe. I'm concerned about keeping a child safe. Behind him, Charlotte had started crying in earnest now. Not loud sobs, she was too well trained for that, but quiet, shaking tears of relief and fear and confusion all mixed together. Wright reached for his radio without taking his eyes off Camilla. This is Sergeant Wright, East Gallery, 3rd floor. I need immediate assistance at balcony access corridor B. I have Princess Charlotte with me, and am requesting her parents be contacted immediately. The radio crackled. Copy that, Sergeant. What's the nature of the situation? Wright hesitated. How did you say this? How did you report that the Queen Consort had just tried to drag a terrified child onto a balcony 3 stories up? Camilla watched him, her expression changing. The anger faded, replaced by something calculating. She was thinking ahead, Wright realized, already planning her version of events, already constructing the narrative that would make him look like an overreactive guard who'd misinterpreted a harmless situation. Security concern regarding Princess Charlotte, Wright said into the radio. I need senior protection officers, and the Princess of Wales contacted immediately. Priority response. Understood. Officers en route. ETA, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Wright had to keep this situation contained for 2 minutes. Keep Charlotte safe. Keep Camilla from leaving. keep himself between them. Camilla stepped back from the balcony doorway, letting the door close. The sudden cooperation made Wright more nervous, not less. She was adapting her strategy. "Charlotte, darling," Camilla said, her voice shifting to something softer. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was trying to help you practice for tomorrow, and you got frightened. That's understandable. The balcony can seem very high when you're not used to it." Charlotte pressed harder against the wall. "You said I was going to learn what happens to little girls who cause problems. You said the family would be better without me making things difficult." The words hung in the air like smoke. Wright felt something twist in his chest. Whatever was happening here, it went deeper than a simple misunderstanding. This was pattern, not incident. This was something that had been building. "Charlotte's frightened and confused," Camilla said, still using that gentle tone but looking at Wright now. "Children often misremember things when they're scared. I would never say something like that. Would I?" She was good. Wright had to give her that. Without witnesses, it became her word against a frightened child's memory. And children did sometimes misremember things, mix up contexts, misunderstand adult conversations. Except Charlotte's fear was real. Wright had seen enough genuine terror in his military career to recognize it. "Ma'am, you can explain everything when the protection officers arrive," Wright said. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. But for now, I need you to remain here while Charlotte stays with me." Footsteps echoed in the corridor, multiple sets, moving fast. The cavalry was arriving. 4 Royal Protection officers appeared, led by Inspector Sarah Chen. She took in the scene instantly. Camilla standing near the balcony door looking composed but disheveled. Wright in a protective stance, Charlotte crying behind him. "Sergeant Wright," Chen said carefully. "Report." Wright had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times during training. How to report a situation involving senior royals without making accusations, but without downplaying legitimate concerns. "Ma'am," I observed Queen Camilla, bringing Princess Charlotte to this corridor. The princess appeared distressed. When I attempted to verify her well-being, Her Majesty became defensive and attempted to take the princess onto the balcony. The princess verbally expressed fear and stated her parents were unaware of her location. I physically intervened to prevent the princess from being taken onto the balcony against her will. Chen's expression didn't change, but Wright saw her eyes sharpen. "Princess Charlotte, are you hurt?" Charlotte shook her head, fresh tears, but she was trying to compose herself now that more adults were here. "No, but she was going to, she was." The words choked off. "It's all right," Chen said gently. "You're safe now. We've contacted your mother. She's on her way." Camilla finally spoke, her voice regaining some of its authority. "Inspector, this is a gross overreaction to what was simply a practice session that got out of hand." Charlotte became frightened, understandably, and Sergeant Wright misinterpreted the situation. While I appreciate his dedication to duty, he's made serious errors in judgment that need to be addressed. "We'll be reviewing all aspects of the situation, ma'am," Chen said diplomatically. "For now, I need to ask you to come with Officers Davies and Morton. There are some questions we need to ask." "Are you detaining me?" Camilla's voice went sharp again. "No, ma'am. We're conducting a welfare check following a reported incident involving a minor. Standard protocol. I'm sure you understand." The 2 officers stepped forward, not threatening but present, a subtle reminder that Inspector Chen's request wasn't actually optional. Camilla looked at Wright one last time. "This isn't over, Sergeant. Not by a considerable distance." Then she turned and walked down the corridor, flanked by the officers. Her posture was rigid, her movements controlled. She looked like a woman who'd been wrongly accused and was being very patient about it. Wright didn't care. His concern was the small, crying child who was still pressed against the wall behind him. He crouched down slowly, making himself less intimidating. "Charlotte, you're safe now. Your mum's coming. Is there anything you need right now? Water? A place to sit?" Charlotte looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped forward and hugged him, just wrapped her small arms around his neck and held on. Wright froze. Royal protocol said, "Don't touch royal family members unnecessarily." But this wasn't unnecessary. This was a frightened child, seeking comfort from someone who'd protected her. Very gently, he put one hand on her back. "You're all right. You did the brave thing. You asked for help when you needed it. That's exactly what you should have done." She said I wasn't supposed to tell anyone, Charlotte whispered against his shoulder. She said it would make problems for the family. But I was scared. When she started pulling me toward the balcony, I was so scared. I know, and you did exactly right by letting me know you were frightened. Inspector Chen was making calls, coordinating response, requesting palace CCTV footage of the corridor. The other officers had spread out, securing the area, preventing anyone else from approaching. Then Wright heard different footsteps. Running, light but fast. Charlotte. Kate appeared around the corner, William close behind her. The Princess of Wales looked like she'd been in a meeting formal dress, hair perfect, but her face was stark with fear. Charlotte released Wright and ran. Kate dropped to her knees and caught her daughter, pulling her close, checking her for injuries with practiced maternal efficiency. Are you hurt? Did she hurt you? Talk to me, sweetheart. I'm okay. The guard helped me. He made her let go. Kate looked up at Wright. He'd stood when Charlotte released him and was now standing at attention, unsure of the protocol for this situation. How did you stand after you'd just physically restrained the Queen Consort to protect the future king's daughter? Thank you. Kate's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with tears. Thank you for protecting her. William had his hand on Charlotte's head, stroking her hair while Kate held her. His face was a careful mask, but Wright could see the fury underneath, the quiet, dangerous kind of anger that came from someone who was imagining exactly what could have happened. Sergeant Wright, I presume, William said. Yes, sir. Inspector Chen briefed me on the radio. You stopped Camilla from taking Charlotte onto the balcony. Yes, sir. The princess appeared distressed and requested help. When Queen Camilla attempted to take her onto the balcony despite the princess's clear fear, I intervened. William's jaw tightened. Charlotte, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. From the beginning. And I need you to tell me the truth, even if someone told you not to. Charlotte pulled back from Kate slightly, wiping her eyes. Then, in a small but surprisingly steady voice, she explained how Camilla had found her after her morning lessons, how she'd said they needed to have a private talk, how she'd brought Charlotte to the corridor and started saying things about how Charlotte made things difficult for the family, how some people didn't appreciate what they had, how maybe Charlotte needed to understand how serious things were. She kept walking me toward the balcony, Charlotte said, and she kept saying things about how high up we were, how far down the courtyard was, how I needed to understand my place in the family. I tried to stop, but she just kept pulling me. Then the guard came, and I asked for help. I know I'm not supposed to bother the guards, but I was scared. You were absolutely right to ask for help, William said firmly. That's exactly what you should have done. Kate was still holding Charlotte, but her eyes had gone hard. Wright recognized that look. He'd seen it on the faces of soldiers who'd just found out someone had threatened their unit. Where is she now? Kate asked Inspector Chen. Being questioned in the West Wing security office, Your Royal Highness. Officers are reviewing CCTV footage of the corridor approach to verify the sequence of events. I want to see that footage, William said. Of course, sir. We're pulling it now. Wright stood there, aware that his role in this was essentially over, but unsure if he was dismissed. Charlotte had been returned to her parents. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the aftermath was just beginning. William looked at him. Sergeant, I'm going to need you to make a formal statement about everything you observed. Every detail, no matter how small. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Absolutely. Good. Inspector Chen will coordinate with you. William paused. And Sergeant, you did the right thing. I know it wasn't an easy call to make, but you absolutely did the right thing. The words should have felt like vindication. Instead, Wright just felt tired and worried. Because Camilla was still the Queen Consort, still had enormous power and influence, and he'd just physically restrained her and directly contradicted her orders. His career was likely over, but when he looked at Charlotte, safe in her mother's arms, that seemed like an acceptable price. We're approaching the moment that changed everything. If you haven't subscribed to Crown Watch yet, do it now. We share stories like this every single day. Now let's get to what happened when the truth came out. The CCTV footage confirmed everything. Wright sat in a small conference room watching the security monitors alongside Inspector Chen, Captain Richard Wells, the head of Palace Guard Command, and two other senior officers. The footage showed the corridor from 3 different angles. They watched Camilla approach Charlotte near the tutorial room, Watched the conversation too far for audio, but body language clear. Charlotte's reluctance, Camilla's insistence, the walk to the corridor. Then the hallway cameras picked up the sequence. Camilla leading Charlotte, Charlotte trying to slow down, to pull back. Camilla's hand tight on the girl's wrist, the balcony door opening. Charlotte's attempt to step away, Camilla pulling her forward. Then Wright's arrival. The conversation, the moment Camilla grabbed the door handle, Wright's intervention. Clear case, Captain Wells said quietly. He was a man in his late 50s, career military, who'd seen everything in his 30 years of service. She was coercing the child. The child was in distress. You responded appropriately. Sergeant, Queen Camilla is claiming this was a misunderstanding, Inspector Chen said, that she was trying to help Charlotte practice for the balcony appearance, and that Charlotte panicked, causing Wright to misinterpret the situation. Wells rewound the footage, played it again. That's not what this shows. This shows deliberate manipulation of a frightened child. Look at the timestamps. Camilla kept Charlotte in that corridor for 8 minutes before Wright intervened. 8 minutes of what appears to be psychological intimidation, given the child's visible distress. What about audio? One of the other officers asked. No audio in that section of corridor. Privacy considerations for royal family movements. We have audio from the security checkpoint she passed coming in, but nothing from the corridor itself, which meant it came down to Wright's observations, Charlotte's testimony, and the visual evidence of body language and positioning. Will Charlotte's statement be considered reliable? Wright asked. Given her age, she's old enough to clearly articulate what happened, Chen said, and her account is consistent with what we observe in the footage. More importantly, the Prince and Princess of Wales are taking this extremely seriously. That, Wright thought, might be the most important factor. Whatever Camilla's position, William was the heir to the throne, and Kate was Charlotte's mother. If they believed their daughter had been threatened, no amount of royal hierarchy would stop them from acting. What happens now? Wright asked. Wells looked at him seriously. Now you write the most detailed incident report you've ever written. Every observation, every word spoken, every gut instinct that made you concerned. Leave nothing out. Be completely factual and professional, but be thorough. And then? Then the palace handles it internally, which means quietly, carefully, and with minimal public exposure. But make no mistake, Sergeant, this will have consequences. Wright spent the next 4 hours writing his report, every detail. The morning starting too quiet, Charlotte's silence, the grip on her wrist, the words spoken, the balcony door, his decision to intervene, his physical contact with Camilla, all of it. When he finished, his hand was cramping and his head hurt. But the report was complete. He submitted it through official channels and then returned to his quarters, expecting to be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. That was standard procedure after any incident involving physical intervention with a royal family member. Instead, he got a message to report to a different location in the palace, one of the private meeting rooms in the residential wing. When he arrived, Princess Anne was waiting. The Princess Royal stood by the window, looking out over the palace gardens. She was dressed simply country casual rather than formal, and held a cup of tea. When Wright entered and stood at attention, she turned and looked at him for a long moment. "Sit down, Sergeant Wright. This isn't a formal meeting." Wright sat, though everything in his training said to remain standing in the presence of royalty. Anne took the chair across from him. "I've read your report. I've watched the footage. I've spoken to Charlotte and to my nephew, William. I wanted to speak with you directly because what you did today required considerable courage, and I wanted to acknowledge that personally. Ma'am, I was doing my duty. Your duty was to protect the royal family. What you did was make an extremely difficult judgment call about who needed protecting from whom. Those are not the same thing." Wright didn't know how to respond to that. Anne continued. "Camilla is claiming you overreacted, that you misinterpreted a grandmother trying to help a nervous child prepare for a public event. She's suggesting that Charlotte's fear was simply nerves about the balcony height and that you turned an innocent situation into a crisis. With respect, ma'am, that's not what happened. I know. The evidence makes that clear. But evidence and palace politics don't always align neatly." Anne set down her tea. "What's going to happen is this. Camilla will undergo a formal review of her interactions with the younger royals. She'll be required to have supervision present during any time with George, Charlotte, or Louis. Her access to them will be restricted. Will she face any official consequences? Officially, she'll be counselled about appropriate conduct and given a formal warning. Unofficially, Anne's expression hardened. She's lost the trust of the Prince and Princess of Wales. She's demonstrated poor judgment that created a genuine safety risk, and she's made it clear that she views the children as tools for whatever internal issues she's processing about her role in this family. Those consequences matter more than any formal discipline. Wright nodded slowly. As for you, Anne continued, you'll be returning to active duty immediately. No administrative leave. You'll be commended for your judgment and protective action. This will go in your record as exemplary service, not as a disciplinary incident. Relief washed through Wright, though he tried not to show it too obviously. I want you to understand something, Anne said. What you did was notice when something was wrong. You trusted your instincts when it would have been easier to look away. You protected someone who needed protection, regardless of the complications that created. That's what we need in the people who serve this family. Not blind obedience to hierarchy. Good judgment about when the rules matter less than doing what's right. She stood, indicating the meeting was ending. Wright stood as well. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me. Thank your training and your instincts. They saved a child from what could have been a very serious situation. She paused at the door. Charlotte asked me to tell you something, by the way. She wanted you to know that you're her favorite guard now. She said you actually listened when she was scared. After Anne left, Wright sat alone in the room for a few minutes, processing everything. His career wasn't over. Charlotte was safe. Consequences were happening, even if quietly. But he kept thinking about those 8 minutes in the corridor. 8 minutes while Camilla had worked on a frightened child's mind, using the height, the isolation, the power dynamic to make Charlotte feel small and disposable and afraid. What if he hadn't walked down that corridor? What if he'd stayed at his post, assuming everything was fine because it was family? He didn't want to think about those possibilities. 3 days later, Wright was back on duty in the East Wing when he saw Charlotte again. She was with Kate, heading to a private lesson. When she spotted Wright, her face lit up. Mum, that's him. That's the guard I told you about. Kate smiled. I know, darling. We've met. Charlotte pulled free from Kate's hand and walked over to Wright. He stood at attention, but she ignored the formality entirely. Thank you for helping me, she said seriously. I was really scared, and you made it stop. You're welcome, Princess. And you were very brave to ask for help when you needed it. My mum says I should always ask for help if I'm scared, even if someone says I shouldn't tell. Your mum is absolutely right. Charlotte nodded, satisfied. Then she did something that surprised him. She curtsied, very properly, the way she'd been taught for formal occasions, showing respect to someone who'd earned it. Then she returned to Kate, took her mother's hand, and they continued down the corridor. Kate looked back once and mouthed, "Thank you," before they disappeared around the corner. Wright returned to his post. The following weeks brought changes to palace routine. Camilla's schedule was visibly different. She appeared at fewer events with the younger royals. When she did attend, other family members were always present. The private, unsupervised time she'd previously had with George, Charlotte, and Louis was quietly eliminated. Palace staff noticed. They always noticed, but no official announcement was made. No press release explained that the Queen Consort had been restricted in her access to her step-grandchildren. That wasn't how the palace worked. They handled internal problems internally, with quiet efficiency and ironclad discretion. Wright heard through the guard network that Camilla had filed a formal complaint about his conduct. The complaint had been reviewed and dismissed. His intervention was deemed not only appropriate, but exemplary. Several senior officers had used his incident report as a training example for new guards, how to recognize genuine distress versus normal family dynamics, how to make judgment calls under pressure, when to trust instincts over hierarchy. He also heard, though this was less official, that the relationship between Camilla and William had become distinctly cold. They maintained public appearances when necessary, but the underlying warmth that had been slowly building over the years had vanished. Whatever bridge had been constructed between William and his father's second wife had been burned thoroughly on that balcony corridor. 6 weeks after the incident, Wright was called to a private meeting with William. The Prince of Wales received him in a study, informal setting. No pomp, no ceremony. Just a conversation between two men who'd both been trying to protect the same child. "I wanted to speak with you personally," William said, "about what happened with Charlotte. Sir, you made a decision that day that most people wouldn't have had the courage to make. You recognized that power and position don't override basic human decency. That protecting my daughter mattered more than avoiding conflict with someone senior to you in the hierarchy." William paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about what could have happened if you hadn't been there. If you'd been assigned to a different post that morning. If you'd decided Charlotte's fear was just childhood nerves and didn't intervene. Sir, I was simply doing what any guard would have done in that situation." "No," William said firmly. "Most guards would have assumed that a grandmother with a grandchild didn't need oversight. Most would have accepted Camilla's explanation at face value because it was easier than creating conflict. You didn't take the easy path. You took the right one." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small box. "This is an official commendation for exemplary service. It'll be added to your record and noted in your personnel file. But more than that, I wanted you to know that Kate and I trust you, completely. If you're ever concerned about our children for any reason, no matter how small, you come directly to us. No chain of command, no protocol, direct access." Wright took the box, genuinely moved. "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal. Charlotte asks about you sometimes," William added. "Wants to know if you're still working at the palace, if you're okay. She was worried Camilla might have gotten you in trouble for helping her. Tell her I'm fine, and that she should always ask for help when she's scared." "I will." The meeting ended shortly after. Wright returned to his duties with the commendation box in his pocket and a quiet satisfaction in his chest. He'd done the right thing. Even though it was hard, even though it risked his career, even though it meant standing up to someone with enormous power and influence. The uniform didn't make him a hero. The choice did. In the months that followed, palace routine normalized around the new reality. Camilla maintained her public role as queen consort, attending state functions and official events, but her relationship with William and Kate's children had fundamentally changed. Supervised access only, limited private time. The trust had been broken and wouldn't be repaired. Some staff whispered that Camilla had been motivated by jealousy, that the public's genuine affection for Kate and the children grated against her own more complicated relationship with public opinion. Others suggested it was about control, about establishing dominance within the family hierarchy. A few thought it was simple meanness, the kind that comes from someone who's never processed their own pain and passes it along to others. Wright didn't spend much time speculating about motivations. What mattered was the outcome. Charlotte was safe, the other children were protected, and the palace guard had been reminded that their duty was to all members of the royal family, sometimes even protecting them from each other. He saw Charlotte occasionally in the following months, always with Kate or William or a trusted protection officer. Never alone, never vulnerable. She'd smile at him when they passed in corridors, sometimes wave if her parents weren't looking. Just a child who remembered being scared and remembered who helped her. That was enough. The full truth of what happened that day never became public. The palace's official line was simply that Queen Camilla's schedule had been adjusted to accommodate various commitments. No mention of incidents, no discussion of restricted access, no acknowledgement that a royal guard had physically intervened to protect a child from her step-grandmother. That was palace life. Truth and official story didn't always align. What happened behind closed doors stayed there, but the people who needed to know what happened knew. The guards understood that protecting the family sometimes meant difficult choices. The senior royals understood that appearances and hierarchy didn't override safety. And Charlotte understood that when she asked for help, someone would actually help her. Those truths mattered more than public statements. Wright continued his service at the palace, carrying the quiet knowledge that he'd made a real difference on one critical morning. He'd seen something wrong, trusted his instincts, and acted when action was needed. It's a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. That true duty isn't about blind obedience, it's about knowing when protecting someone matters more than maintaining comfortable fictions. The uniform gave Wright authority, but his judgment gave him purpose. In the end, that morning on the balcony corridor came down to a simple choice. Let a frightened child be pulled toward danger because the person doing it had power and position, or step in and face the consequences of intervention. Wright had chosen intervention, and a young princess was safe because of it. That's what service actually means. If this story showed you something about the Royal Guards you didn't know before, make sure you're subscribed to Crown Watch. We share these untold stories from inside the palace every single day. Tomorrow's story is even more shocking. A guard discovers evidence that someone has been systematically stealing from the crown jewels, and the thief is the last person anyone would suspect. You won't want to miss it. Drop a comment below and let us know. Would you have had the courage to intervene, like Sergeant Wright did, knowing it could end your career? We'll see you in the next one.